Teachers often learn about issues outside of school that are impacting their students' behavior and performance. Plans are made to mitigate as many outside factors as possible, leading to improved outcomes.
And so I've seen Hartford School District really believe in that mantra. We hired a school social worker this year who is helping with this work, right? Principals have been kind of functioning as social workers for the past 3 years. And it's great that we have a school social worker that's helping us figure out what are these factors that these kids are coming into school with that might be affecting their behavior. So that's just one way to humanize this kid who might be having these behaviors in school and how to figure out what's going on for them. Go ahead. So what are restorative practices? You can continue. So in a school, restorative discipline is multifaceted in nature. It's messy, right? Just like equity work is messy, it's messy. A kid's gonna mess up, right? They're 11-year-old brains. We know all of the research out there says that it's roughly 25 for people that are born female and roughly between 27 and 35 for people that are born male before this prefrontal cortex of our brain develops. And people are like, oh, now I understand. So these are 11-year-olds and we want to make sure that we're educating them. I talked to my staff at the very beginning of the year, the word discipline comes from the root word disciple, which means to teach and learn. And so punitive consequences, which again, we are probably all used to, do not have a teaching and learning component. They only have a punitive component. It includes interventions when harm has happened, as well as practices that help prevent harm, doing proactive things all the time. I go to assemblies, Tristan's at assemblies, we're talking about what behaviors we're seeing, how we need the behaviors to improve. We're going in and doing advisory circles with advisories that are struggling. All of this helps kids build a sense of belonging, safety, and becoming socially responsible for their own actions when they leave our building. And that's the ultimate goal. Can you click on that response, Ira?
I can do whatever you ask me.
That would be great. So that's a hyperlink. So this work I developed actually at Mount Abraham and brought it here. Oh, boo.
You want to talk us through it?
No, it won't make any sense if you don't see it. That's so it's a response. So it basically says, like, if the kid does these type of behaviors, such as what we call a minor behavior, right? They're annoying to a classmate, they're, help me think of some of the minor ones.
Throwing an eraser.
Right, throwing things across the classroom, right. So things that are like not okay, they're disrupting others' learning, those consequences are like conversations, calls with parents, family meetings, things like that. When it moves over to the major, like a student punched another student, there's always time away from school. And I think that's a misconception that restorative practices are soft. There is time away from school. I think the problem is families don't always see that kids are suspended or kids are having a Saturday detention, right? That's between me and the student's family, Tristan and the student's family and the student. It doesn't involve anyone else. And I think that's frustrating for a lot of people, is like, you don't know what's going to happen, right? You don't know that that kid was held accountable on a Saturday because you weren't there seeing it, and neither was your student.
And sometimes that time away from school is time away from classes, but in the building. Because the other thing that we've worked really hard on is not sending kids into out of school suspensions, right? Like, we know that often, not for every student certainly, but for many students being home for the day, it's just like, okay, great, I have the day off. It doesn't actually feel like much of a consequence. So having those times where we actually can build in time for doing some reflection, working with the counselors, working with us, working with the SAP, that's far more effective when we can do it that way, when it looks like time away from the classroom.
And so we don't call them suspension anymore. We call them in-school restorative days, where that's exactly what they're doing. They start the day filling out their forms with Mrs. Wager or myself. They really reflect on it. They do some schoolwork. They have a meeting with the person, whether it's a student or an adult that they harmed. And that's only if the victim, that's the word that's used in the law, wants to meet with that person, right? If they've caused the harm, the person that was harmed has to say, yep, I'm okay with meeting. Sometimes they hand me a letter and I read the letter to the student, or Mrs. Wager does. And so we constantly are working with kids to try to change the behavior. Go ahead. So here's how we use restorative practices at HMMS. We do advisory circles every single week. Teachers are expected with their advisory to be doing circles with their advisory. That is about building a sense of belonging and community. In those circles, we might offer some topics that we're struggling on with behavior. We might offer some topics that are in the news that kids are asking us about. So it's an opportunity for kids to have real world examples of how we're using restorative practices. It also might be something like, here, the dance is coming up on Friday night and we want to talk about that. We use assemblies. We have roughly 2 a month. It always starts out with restorative reflections, usually from kids that have come to me and said, like, I'm struggling with this in my class. What can we do about it? And if it's a common enough theme, I'll bring it up to the whole school. And we sit through and we talk about that. We brainstorm ways to improve those areas. When a student is suspended and comes back to school, whether that's an external suspension only, their families are invited in, and we have a restorative reentry meeting. The family can invite anybody that they want. The student's advisor is there. I am there. Tristan's usually there. Mrs. Wager sometimes is there. And we talk about what happened, why it happened, and how do we reenter. We give them language, how they talk to their fellow peers about it, right? The worst thing, we don't want kids being like, yeah, I did this, and this is what Justin was so mad. And we just say, it's actually none of your business. And Mr. Bouvier has said that, no, I don't need to talk about this today. And so those meetings are really an opportunity to get families in the building and talk about what are we going to do and create a plan. So there's always a plan that gets sent to teachers and sent to families that says, this is what we agreed to. When it's violated, if it is again, then we go back to the drawing board and come up with a new plan. And sometimes that might look like you're being tutored for a few weeks until we can come up with a one-on-one to help you out with your behaviors. It might look like, okay, you're going to work in the office for the next 3 days, and then you're going to go back into classrooms.
Remember back to the Remember back to the great picture of the two of us at our conference. We went down and happened to have the opportunity to see a number of teachers from Williston Central School presenting. And we have been struggling with some behaviors with our 6th graders that we weren't seeing across the rest of the school, just like struggling with when there was an adult that wasn't their classroom teacher in the classroom, lots of rude and disrespectful behaviors, just an increase in the behaviors, and we'd work closely with the 6th grade teachers already to say, like, what can we do? And so we went and watched this presentation at Williston. They had done a unit the year before from similar things that they had seen around social courage. So we talked to them afterwards. They were literally like, here are our materials. So we came back, we brought it back to the 6th grade teachers and said, what do you think about sort of pausing the current units that we're doing? It's still aligned to the standards. It's still working toward building those skill areas, but really focusing in on this idea of social courage and learning positive character traits and how do we interact with people. And so we paused the unit for 3 weeks, a little over 3 weeks. The students really thought through. They did a culminating event where they invited the related arts teachers who were off team and substitutes in the building, and anybody else who was around to be able to come and see their presentations around these skills. We saw some really positive effects in our 6th grade across the building after the fact. And going forward, we're committed to starting each year with some type of this social courage unit for all of our students, because we saw such a great gain from the kids of really pausing and saying, how is it that we interact with other people? Things that I think for a lot of years, we assumed kids came with, and we just don't see it as much anymore. So.
Next. So what are we doing? So this is our data. And so you're always going to see, if I'm asked to come do a presentation, I'm going to rely on my data, right? So major referrals, when I started in September and October, we were at 34 and 45 a month. Those are kids being sent to the office, being written up for some reason, and being processed in the office. If you look at our data from November through, so we started the 6th grade unit in December, but if you look where we really started hammering on behavior, we are drastically dropping on number of major referrals. We also, if you look at our sense of belonging, right, that's the #1 goal for me. It will always be that kids feel like they belong at the school. So our fall benchmark data for Panorama, which is this company that we use that does a survey on social and emotional well-being of our students, they fill it out themselves. They're given an opportunity to do it at school. So we set in the fall, 74% of our students felt like they belonged or had a trusted adult in the building. Roy, can you read in the number now? 92. We're at 92% for our winter benchmark data. So that is kids feeling like they belong, that they are part of our school community. Looking at out of school suspensions for last year versus this year at the same time period, right? So I didn't take all of last year's, I only took from September to January 23rd, same for this year. 67 last year, we're at 25. And out of that 25, it's this, I would say 7 kids that have reached to 25 days of suspension. There is so much research out there about restorative practices and schools that use them. Oakland, California, I highly recommend you look at their studies. If you have any questions about this, John Kidda, that's where he did his work. He happened to be my next door neighbor where I used to live. and he would fly out to Oakland. But dropout rate reductions have been seen 60% or more for schools that switch to restorative practices versus traditional discipline. Go ahead. We know that there's still work to do. We don't have our heads in the sand. We're not turtles in our shells. So we know, and we have a plan to address this work. So during this school year, we would love to achieve 100% of our students feeling like they belong and have a trusted adult. We are reaching out individually to kids that said, nope, I don't feel that way right now, to see what we can do to help affect that for them. We're going to continue to bring systemic approaches. So that's one of the things I believe in wholeheartedly is a system. It shouldn't be like Tristan walks in my office and I discipline her one way, and then Emma walks in and I give her a separate set of discipline consequences. So we're really working to outline what the response to consequences are for families so that they can have them, so that they also feel like, oh, I might not know what happened, but I know it was something in this menu that happened. For next school year, we're hoping that all students engage in the first 3 weeks of school with our social courage unit that we developed. We're going to continue to develop restorative practices base, our knowledge base for our faculty and staff. This was new-ish to them. They had some dabbling in it, but this is what I did my research in. We're going to begin to implement restorative advisory meetings. So when a student from an advisory misbehaves in the school, their advisory helps hold them accountable. And people get really nervous about that because we don't want to shame. It's not about shame. It's really to say like, hey, Justin, how can we support you to better behave in school? And they come up with the ideas. We're going to start implementing restorative practices in classrooms when harm is caused. So if a kid disrupts an entire classroom, I'm already started this year because it's happened, where I go up to the classroom and I run a restorative circle with the teacher and all of the students. And there's a whole script that has to be followed so that there's no harm caused in those meetings. And I was trained in that, and we can train more people in it. John lives in Virgins, Vermont. So we're going to continue to do that next school year to hope that it changes. And really the social courage unit, we saw so much growth from our 6th graders after doing that. Is that it? Questions, comments, concerns?
Any of my fellow board members have any questions? Yes, Peter.
I do have a concern, which is not a problem unique to restorative justice. It's to any approach to disciplining kids and so forth, which is, and it's not even unique to the school environment. It happens in the criminal environment as well. And that is, there needs to be a recognition of what has happened to the victim, and that we have done what we can to make the victim whole and to allow the victims to proceed as well. So I am believing that that is going to be part of your emphasis, but if it isn't, let me make it clear that it has to be.
I can certainly talk about that. It absolutely is. So when harm is caused, the first person we meet with is the victim. And we ask them, what do they need to stay in school that day if they can? If they can't, we then ask them how we can support them through home, whether it's getting schoolwork for them or whatever. And then we always have a meeting with them, usually for 2 weeks afterwards, to say, how's it going? Are you needing anything additional? And at any time, their family knows, and I tell the student that they can come to me if anything additional is to happen or they're needing additional supports. We do connect them with outside counselors if it's HHB, so hazing, harassment, bullying. If it's any of those violated classes, we try to connect them with someone within that group, that protected class, that also has some therapeutic intervention skills. So like if a kid is harmed for racial harm, we try to find outside agency to come in and work with that student so that it's removed from the school, right? That I'm not being like, oh, it was that hard as a white male. I am not doing that work, that I am doing it. Maggie Ibrahim has been a huge, huge resource for this work. She's met with, I can't even tell, probably a dozen of our students this year just to talk about like, why did you say those things and what, and then met with the victims to say like, how can I support you as another person of color, as another female, whatever is the broken category. Maggie's on maternity leave now, so we will be looking for other people. Yeah. Oh, in a week. Sorry, in 1 week.
Close enough.
And so we'll be. I worked with a company out of the Northeast Kingdom at my old school, and I'm hopeful to work with them. It's free of charge for us to consult with them. If they come down, it costs money, but we can call them and get consultations for students when that stuff happens.
Yes, Nancy.
I am enmeshed in school avoidance right now. So I'm curious as to how you're tracking that and what you're doing to help these kids get over why they're avoiding to coming to school?
Yeah. But that's a whole different,
I realize
yeah.
that, yes.
So currently, myself, as well as Carrie Russell, our school social worker for the district, or our district social worker, and all of the principals from Windsor County are getting together to talk about school avoidance and truancy and to come up with a more humanized practice than what we currently have, which is a letter at 5 days, a letter at 10 days, a letter at 15 days, and then state's attorney referral. So we're meeting, I believe, next or 2 Wednesdays from now to talk about that and how we move forward, because it's not working what we have now, right? School avoidance,
Right.
they're just avoiding, or parents are calling in sick or whatever they're doing. But that is a topic of concern, considering I think nationwide we're at 40% truancy. And so we're really trying to figure out how do we get that down in Hartford School District.
Okay,
And we are
so
below that.
for me, I don't consider truancy the same thing as avoidance.
Some of our most truant students are school avoiders. They're
Yeah.
not truant because they're
Okay.
avoiding school for some reason.
I
And we're
wanted to
trying
be sure that,
and we're trying to figure out what that reason is. We've had
Exactly.
countless meetings with parents to be like, talk to us. We've developed great alternative plans. And I would say all but one, we have gotten back to school in some way, shape, or form.
Thank you.
Whether it's we've used BTVLC, which is an online learning academy
Right.
through the state, because it's free for middle schoolers this year, which is awesome. So we've been tapping into them. If a kid's like, I'll try it from home, awesome. And they still do check-ins, they still can access any class that they want to access with us. So we've done that, we've done some tutoring, we've done some modified school days. So we really are trying to get the avoiders back to school as
Thank
well.
you.
Yep.
Thank you. That is it.
Mr. Heavysides?
Obviously, this is my first meeting.
I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
No,
but
that's all right.
I did.
How is this presented to the public, to the parents, to prepare them for the change that you're trying to accomplish?
How was when I started, you mean?
Yes.
So I redid the Hartford Middle School Handbook when I started, and we made sure it got out to all families to let them know, like, these are the changes. Tristan communicates every week in a Friday newsletter that goes out to all families via email that says, here are the changes that are happening, here's what we're doing, here's why we're doing it. So all of this has been discussed in that form. I've tried to get a parent night together, and unfortunately it's the same 7 parents that come to that parent night, and it's not the 7 parents I actually need at that parent night. And so it's really been an effort of one-on-one reaching out to families, building that relationship. I've done more home visits in this school year than I have ever done in my 22 years prior, because we're trying to really build those relationships with families. And so I've gone with the director of special ed, I've gone with our school social worker, and we're really reaching out to families being like, how can we support your kid? And how do we do that? That's in a way that is working for you and your family and is working for the school.
Coach, you have any questions?
Is he still with us?
Oh, sorry. We've been involved in that restorative work for a while and helped to implement it at the state level. And it's been like they referred, this work is just as difficult as DEI work. It takes a lot of resolve, a lot of intentionality, and our team at the middle school seems to be bringing that intentionality to the table. So kudos to you guys.
All right, because I want to expand, or I had the same concerns as Mr. Heavysides about communication. And I'm going to sort of direct this at the superintendent. I'm a little concerned that this is the first time I'm actually hearing about what is happening in the middle school. It seems like a very great program, but immediately it would be better, in my opinion, if we had a presentation at the beginning of the year, because that could help explain to certain people who come up to us and say, what's going on at the middle school type thing. So in that way, again, I've said it many times, the tone from the top is very important. So if it's not our place to say yes or no, because we don't have the expertise. That falls on the superintendent administration, the professionals. But by the same token, for us to be supportive, we have to know. So I think that's one thing. I think the other thing that I would like to see as part of our ends reporting is some of the figures that were quoted here on a periodic basis. Because again, that shows that it's working, hopefully. Or if it's not working, it may need additional resources, and here's why. Because another thing the district doesn't do well is we generalize about all the good things that are happening, but we don't have evidence to really say, this is what's happening. And I think it seems to me there's also a transition, because I know as a parent, I'm used to the punitive, especially since my father was a principal, but that's a whole different matter. But so I think the communication, and the other thing that occurred to me is maybe civic groups would be a great place to reach out. Because Rotary is always looking for a speaker. And I know it's time out, so you guys work hard enough. So I appreciate that. So I don't want to add anything, but I just think more communication. And I agree, this is the best attended school board meeting we've had in many years.
Yeah. And we are revising the way we do the ends reporting, and that your comments are actually part of what we're trying to do. So when and where to do it is, our work going forward.
Okay.
When are we going to do that? And, including the data, we've already done one revision report, and, we definitely will include this data. Panorama is a big part of our ends report.
And I understand that. So I'm just making sure.
Yeah.
And I guess the other
Russ,
Go ahead, Coach.
I think that, this year has been another interesting year as always. But I think we need to keep our intention around our community engagement, because that is one of those platforms where we can share that space, with the administration around certain topics, especially like a new endeavor, starting at either one of the schools or all of the schools, especially of this level. I agree with you. We don't do as well as we would hope. That's part of the reason why we started that, was to try to get more communication, to, our constituents, basically, the voters and taxpayers in town, who might not have a student in school at present and are hearing directly from the school. So your point's well taken.
Yes, especially as the person who organizes the community engagement. I too can use speakers and topics. And I guess in the dropout rate success, I'm guessing that is sort of based on middle school and high school as well, because
That data is, so I don't know middle school dropout rates. We don't allow students to drop out because of the age.
okay, yeah,
So
but-
it's high school data, and that literally is pulled from nationwide data of schools that use restorative
and
practices.
my question was poorly worded, I apologize, but it's a coordinated effort at the middle school, then the high school. So that would be something else I look forward to hearing about,
Yeah.
making sure that good work here doesn't die on the vine, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, and any work in dropout, reporting or evidence towards, reducing the dropout rate is based on years of pre-work. So middle school, even elementary school behavior and issues at elementary school can affect your dropout rate, and things that happen to kids like retention. Years ago, we studied retention, we still do, and what an impact that has on dropout rate. So that's why we really avoid that.
Okay,
And
again. all
so
right,
it
any-
really, we've gotten pretty skilled at trying to recognize the precursors to certain behaviors all the way up through the system. Attendance is one, like Tristan and Justin talked about, we're working on really hard, because it's increased quite a bit. And it was already bad, but with the pandemic, it got much worse. And it's a nationwide phenomenon, and we're all trying to figure out what are we going to do to have an impact on this? Whether it's avoidance or other issues that kids aren't coming.
Any other questions or comments?
No, I really appreciate
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for coming on this snowy
And
evening.
I'm happy to come anytime to talk about restorative practices in any form. So.
Yeah.
Right up the road. Thank you.
And all the rest of the middle school teachers, do you mind if they introduce themselves? I don't want to
absolutely.
put you on the spot, but it would be very nice for the board to know that there's 4 teachers here
No, wait,
tonight.
no, wait a minute. We want people to show up, and you don't get them to show up by putting them on the spot.
We have
Would you like
4,
me to introduce them?
Sure.
I'll stand this way.
Thank you.
4 middle school teachers. So.
We have 4 middle school teachers, Emma Woodruff, Rebecca Kaplan, Deb Dixon, and Kira Johnston, who came to join us today. So
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for
Well,
coming.
welcome.
Try to put
Thank
you
you
on-
for coming.
they'll never come again.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for carrying.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I just think it's nice for you to have some faces to the names you hear once in a while.
It is.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay,
Drive safe.
and now the real fun begins. Revision 5 of the budget. Who,
Yeah, well, I'm gonna let Jake talk mostly, but just quickly, when the board gave me the task of reducing the budget from where we were 10.5 to 7.9 or possibly 8.5% increase on the property tax rate. The way that I've always managed that, I know it hasn't been this current board, but in the early years of my tenure, we had several years that we needed to cut back. And the way that I handled that with policy governance and some discretion and confidentiality of all those folks that work for us is using a proportional reduction. So I look at the number of students in each school. I'm very comfortable figuring out how many kids in each school and how many dollars go towards each school and sort of proportionally making those reductions. I come from a supervisory union where everything was done by assessment. So all the SU costs were divvied out to the schools by the assessment, which was the number of students in each of the schools that sent schools, that were part of the supervisory union. So it's just a common practice and a kind of a fair, equitable way to do things. I knew that the board specifically mentioned athletics. The athletics budgets have increased, I think 31% over the last couple of years. So I knew that they could withstand some cuts specifically. So that's how I came up with the budget proposal of reductions. And we've already begun working with the administration in each school to get at those numbers. That'll be work that I do with them to have the least amount of impact on, their big initiatives like restorative practice or new initiatives they're working on, and, the least impact they can on the students in their school and the teachers that, work there. So that's just kind of a little nutshell about how I go about with the board, when we have to make cuts. Not fun for anyone. It's not something we like to do. We've worked the last 8 years, 12 years really, but 8 years really building our programs and improving our attractiveness and trying to increase our, our functioning and our improvement in our programs. And so anytime people hear cuts, they're like, oh no, we're going backwards. Well, we try to make it so it's as little impact as possible and we don't affect that forward momentum. And I'm confident we'll be able to do that. Jake's done a great job of finding areas in the budget where we could reduce things like the building specific repairs without stopping that work. He found that we have a fuel oil reserve account that should be depleted because it's really an operating expense. So that's a good account to close out and apply that towards our heating fuel for next year, which did go up drastically. And then we also found the building specific system repair account that also is an operating expense. So it really shouldn't be a reserve. And then you see the cuts that we need to make to each budget. So questions about that before we get into what the actual result of all this is? Or
Well,
just
I
keep
guess-
rolling.
Just to make it clear, we're taking $70,000 out of reserves and putting it to use. And that is taxpayer money, so it does help, and it does show that we are taking it seriously and reducing some of our comfort factor. Because having those reserves is a comfort factor to a certain degree. And unfortunately, or fortunately, this is not something that can continue because we're depleting it.
Right. And we have, as been said many times over the years, work that needs to be done, even still after all the efforts we put in on the building, particularly unfortunately, the two elementary schools and other kinds of things where we've got to deal with them at some point.
And, you know, and yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned that because we don't want to lose sight of that. We certainly don't want to let things slide to where they were. When I began, at least, we were really in the hole, and I can't say we've caught up to where we have no work. We have a lot of work to do, but we have a lot of property. We have a lot of buildings and a lot of property. It's a lot of square footage and a lot of space to maintain. You know what it is just to keep up your own home. Well, the size of some of our buildings, they require maintenance and upkeep just as your home does or your vehicle. So we don't want to let that slide too much. We can not do as much as we were going to do, but we still have, you know, $300,000 in the budget to do specific building repairs and maintenance. And we're still working to plan to do the roofs at Dothan Brook and Queechee. We're not going to stop that work, but we're going to, keep planning and keep developing, how to get the best for the taxpayers.
Part of our charge is to be good stewards of the property of the community. Now, this is the property of the community.
Absolutely. And I mean, regarding the roofs, we have money ready to go. Unfortunately, the building environment has not been favorable to consume that work. So we're sort of balancing an absolute need with current factors. Okay, so any other discussion on the high level here? Or do we want to get right into the gritty details?
Did I miss anything, Jake?
No, those were good highlights. So as Tom said, he gave you the highlights. Basically, we're at 170,000 with the reductions in tapping into the reserves. Further $160,000 for reductions to the budget as far as athletics and the additional schools. So, you're looking at a total reduction of 330,000. Obviously, we've had some stuff happen between, when we sent out this packet to even yesterday, last night. So presently, we've talked about some initiatives, especially with the support staff. Currently, we are using $500,000 to buy down the taxes. And with all the other settlements and everything else that we've come to, we're looking at a 7.7% increase on property taxes and 0.8% on income base.
Which sucks, but it is what it is. I mean, what we have to make people understand is, even though it's a 7.7 increase, we're not adding anything, we're maintaining. And even at that, we're struggling in maintaining and not doing everything we might think is prudent to maintain type thing. So I'll let you continue, Jacob.
Yeah. So this is just the projected ed state tax. If we're talking about all expenditures, it's going to be 47,607,131. Obviously, the CLA hit us pretty bad this year. Same with the equalized pupil. I will say the only thing that could affect our tax rates possibly positively was if the legislature did in fact bump up the yields further. I know there's been some possible discussion on that. And I don't know if Coach has heard anything. But
make
the last
sure
thing
you
I
get
had
the
heard
right
was that
one.
the state is pretty flush with cash. So it's possible that it happens, not guaranteed, but as far as a way to help taxpayers, it's possible.
And I think we can be more blunt. If people in Hartford are concerned about their taxes, it's time to reach out to your legislators and say, can we use more of our state surplus to buy down the tax rate? I mean, this is where the taxpayers can take an affirmative action. It may not result in anything, but the more support that it garnishes, the more likely we'll have some help. And I was looking at this, and I have to redo the numbers, but some of the changes really, like if the CLA remained at 86%, we'd actually be talking about a tax decrease.
Right.
And the CLA is common level of appraisal is out of our control. It reflects the crazy real estate market. So not to make an excuse, but there's enough, and like the number of kids have actually gone up, but our equalized student count went down. So this is like a perfect storm
It is.
hitting us all in one year. And unfortunately, the taxpayers are the ones who are going to feel the pain.
So I don't know what the appetite for the board is. I mean, we're at 7.7% now. If you chose to, you could potentially apply more surplus, but that's up to you.
Because as I remember, our surplus is 2.8.
Roughly.
So, but again, it's like a one-time fix, because
It is.
eventually we're not gonna have the surplus, especially as we continue to budget tighter and tighter. So it becomes less pain today for a lot more pain tomorrow type situation.
There are ways that money is supposed to be spent, and we can't do that if we use it to buy down today's bill.
Although the 2.8 is unreserved, right?
Yes.
That doesn't include the money we set aside for the roofs.
I understand, but it's
Yeah,
things that, there's a reason we put it aside.
yeah.
And we're just deciding it looked really nice to have additional zeros in the bank account, though it does. But we really were thinking this will allow us to do things in the future that we could not do without it.
Yeah. And last year we used $1 million, as I recall.
Correct.
So right there, that's another one of the factors, because we had, due to COVID, a larger than normal surplus in 1 year.
How much would it cost to buy it down to a 7.0?
So we're 7.7. Good.
680,000 brings you down to a 7.0.
An additional 600 or a total?
Total 680,000.
Okay. I wouldn't, I mean, what do other people think? I mean, and what does the administration think? I mean, we all need to speak up and express our opinions here. I personally would go for 6.95, but that's just because it's not 7. Yeah.
Well,
But the principle's the same, Peter,
I
sorry.
understand.
Yeah.
You would have been a great gas station.
I did work as a petroleum transfer engineer for a number of years.
Yeah, I would just be concerned if there's any bump in the road
We have,
as we, work next year, you know, with, we collect our revenue from the town, and if there's a bump there, are we gonna be in, you know, our cash flow is gonna be impacted, so we can't make payroll or something of that
Yeah.
effect.
The fact is that.
For that, our cash flows would still be settled
Yeah.
enough to where we could manage.
Really, so we would just really be impacting any future sort of
Projects.
reserve or ability to buy down
Yes.
future increases. But is, you know, sometimes, you know, in the 12 years I've been here, there's years that are unique, like this. And then, you know, they're not always, you know, they're not consecutive. They don't always happen. This sort of bad news on bad news. That's kind of what we're dealing with. And Russ, you've predicted in the past that maybe we're heading for some other bumps as we reassess. I don't know what you think.
I mean, I think that is a legitimate point. And this year, a thing that worked in our favor is the unprecedented increase in the yield calculation. Normally it goes up a couple percentage points. This year it went up about 4 or 5, reflecting the state surplus. And it doesn't take much of a pessimist to think that the economy is going to turn the other way. And I know the real estate market is turning the other way, unfortunately. So that is something we need to be aware of, type thing. I guess it comes down to, in the way I think about it, is 7% and 7.9, they're both bad numbers. And I mean, I don't think, I'm not sure, and I like other people's opinions, if it really is going to make it that much difference.
So my personal opinion is that we have an obligation, to the extent we can, without putting the enterprise at risk, to reduce the harm to taxpayer. There are limits on what we can do without putting the enterprise at risk. And at the same time, not only is it important that we do that, but it helps that we are seen to be doing it. And by having this conversation, by having a discussion of the risks to district that come from having lower reserves, not doing some of the things that we need to do or want to do. I mean, it's very easy to say in the abstract to take money away from athletics because we got a lot of money lately, and therefore they won't really notice it, except that for children who have been quite frankly traumatized by what's happened in the last couple of years, this is one of the ways that they are able to heal. And there are benefits to the spending. So it's always a balancing job. And is 7.0 the perfect number? Is 7.7 the perfect number? Or at least the best of the bad numbers?
The least of the worst.
Yeah.
6.9 different.
Yeah. So unlike you not liking the 0.99, but liking a sort of roundish number or a number that fits, I would be willing to buy it down to a 7.5, having started at 10.5, which means that we have done a significant job in trying to reduce the number that the taxpayers need to hit. And I think that would be a reasonable compromise, as all these things always are. But that's just my opinion. And I believe Nancy.
My main concern is what's going to happen next year. We're giving our taxpayers this really nice, well, as best we can, a break this year, but what happens next year and it goes up another 3%?
Indeed.
Yeah.
And how is that going to affect
So
people that we're serving?
the one thing that sort of potentially justifies it is, and this is like, making predictions is hard, particularly about the future. At least reasonably lately, the inflationary trend has been taming.
Mhm.
It's not quite as high as it has been. Now, there are any number of things, including the behavior of the Soviets in Ukraine and the fact that the Chinese have just invented new and better ways to not deal with COVID that make our rather sad efforts look brilliant, that are going to have real impacts on our economy. There are different distant parts of the world that have a direct impact on our pocketbooks. And so, at least at the moment, assuming those things don't get even more out of hand, it looks like the efforts to try to tame the economy are having a appreciable result. So you could say, well, we can anticipate a slightly lower rate of inflation next year, which will help. That doesn't necessarily answer your valid concerns.
Coach, do you have anything you want to add?
I think that the points that have been made so far, are pretty accurate. As Russ has said, when we started this process, and I want you to look at line 11, and you can see that we went from a 93.3 common level of appraisal to 86.76, and now we're at 77.15. And everybody in this room understands the effect that our appraisal rate, being that common level, has on every individual budget across the state. And I think that one of the things that we're battling with in the legislature is how do we help all of the communities with this appraisal issue? Because what we're seeing is this is a statewide average number as well. It isn't just Hartford's. And so if Hartford reappraises and our neighbors don't, the total state number is going to be affected by that. So I'm hoping, and there's a number of us thinking in this regard, that what we need to do is a full statewide reappraisal, and then we're on even ground, as a state. It isn't what did Hartford do, what did Burlington do, what did this guy do, what did that community, and we'd all be on the same playing field. Because when we had that 93, the tax rate was in that 3.5–4% range, and then, as, the CLA dropped, the rate went up again, in the ensuing year. And because of the revenue picture, from the state and what we had saved as a district, we were able to buy down that tax rate in the year before. We don't have that revenue picture that we had then this year to make that big a buy down. So that's part of the reason why we went and asked the administration to come back, with alternatives to that 10.9, because it was only 2 weeks ago that's what we were looking at. So and I think that this is our best effort, like Peter was saying. And we have to bring a number to the voters. And I hope that we all feel that we put, a strong effort into coming up with the best number possible at this point in time. That's within our control, because when you look at that sheet, that worksheet, there's a lot of things that are outside of our control.
Any other discussion?
Obviously, this is the first time I've seen these numbers, but it's a double-edged sword. It's a no-win situation. We need to, once I'm on the kick about educating people here, we need to educate the citizens of this town about where we're at. Because coming in with a 7 or 8% increase, it's a hit, especially we don't know what the other side's doing to begin with. But second of all, we have a great district. We have great facilities. I don't want to see that change. But at the same time, I can look at the people out there. I heard them. I was with a lot of people in the senior center and heard a lot and their concerns. And I think trying to get the budget through this year is not going to be easy. But whatever it is we come up with, we need to educate the people that will listen as to, okay, we can reduce it to here. But the implication is, at some point, you got to put it back. And the way the environment is today, we take 2 million, 3 million, whatever it is we're going to cut out. Next year, look at the roofs. You thought you had the money, and here we are. You're going to probably be fortunate to get 1, not 2. And when you get to the rest of the stuff that's going to need to be done to maintain these facilities, it's going to be expensive. And the people need to understand, sure, this is what we can do this year, but next year, I don't care what it is, you've got to put something back, and the year after is going to be more than that. And I think the public will listen if somebody will stand there and tell them up front, not after the fact.
And you're looking at it.
And so I mean, I was collecting signatures over the weekend, and I was in the senior housing, and the concern out of every one of these people was, how much is it going to cost me this year? And then they proceeded to tell me where they are with their finances, what little they have. And these are people that are in senior housing. And they're hardly making it. And food versus, but my biggest thing is, no matter what it is we decide on, we've got to go to the public, I'm going to say now, and start talking about this so that they understand. They may not like it, but I think they'll support it, instead of if it all of a sudden is just, here's the budget. And that will make them angry.
I would agree. And I think part of that education is that in reality, only about 1 in 4 Hartford taxpayers are actually going to pay whatever percentage increase we vote on because of what Jacob mentioned, the income sensitivity provisions. For example, under the state guidelines, your education property tax at certain income levels can only be 2.4% of your actual income. So there is a mechanism to protect those. They still feel some pain, but not as much as,
Right.
and that's the kind of education that needs to get out there. And given the fact that everything is so complex, it makes it that much more difficult, but we still have to try. I volunteered to go to Rotary meetings.
Yep.
And I think the others, if we know of other situations in the community where we can do the outreach, I would be willing to do that, because you're absolutely right. To say, sit at even the information night
Mhm.
is not fair. Because for one, people have all this time to build up anger type thing. So yes, and I would encourage thoughts on where we can do that, because unfortunately, I don't know how many people are watching out in TV land, but a lot of people aren't paying attention until we start saying this number, and then their interest picks up. And historically, Hartford has been very generous in its support of its school systems, and I would hope that continues.
Right.
But I think, again, Doug's got it right on target. I've been getting calls all week, from I should say my contemporaries in town, who are really struggling right now. And I think it's important, and it always has been. And that's why, I think it's been so important to us as a board, is to try to find ways to communicate that. So as Doug and Russ are clearly stating, and we all understand, this particular budget cycle is going to require a lot more information, to, the public. Now that we have the pieces of the puzzle, before us, we do have to share that information, with everyone, and why it's impacted. I think, it's been pretty clear, been doing this a little while, and basically Hartford feels very strongly about its schools, and has for years. And we have a responsibility, like Doug and Russ are, heralding right now, to get that information out to folks. And we know it's not going to be happy news, but if people understand, and especially the complexity of the fact that some of our residents are not going to be hit quite as hard as others. That's all important information, to get out to the public.
So, if I may,
Absolutely.
just to move this along, because we do have to reach a decision at some point. And with extreme awareness of my lack of knowing what the right answer is, I would move that we approve the budget with a buy down to a 7.5% tax increase.
I'll second. Any parting comments before we take our vote? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Okay, so what we would need to do to complete the warnings is have Jake calculate what that total expenditure budget will be to
It's gonna
get to
be-
7.5. He's got it.
It's gonna be 47,607,131. And that's gonna be with a $550,000 buy down. Gets us to 7.5.
All right. Can you say that total number again?
47,607,131.
And that's in our
Yes,
packet.
That is.
Okay, the reason why I'm hesitating a little, it's on the budget sheet that's in our packet, the tax calculator sheet. You have 47,607,131, and you have the percent increase in tax rate, 7.7.8 on the income. So
with the because this,
so it doesn't
the
affect.
document prepared for you was based on a $500,000 buy down. The only number that's changing here is on line 3, all revenues. You're basically bumping that up 50,000.
Okay.
The expenditures don't change, the revenues do change.
So we've gone from 500 to 550.
Yes,
Right.
Okay, so your tax calculator sheet, when you make that adjustment in the top section, the 7.7 will be 7.5.
7.5.
But the actual expenditure is the same because you're applying district
More revenue.
revenue.
Right, to the revenue side.
Yeah, does that, I think that comes under locals revenues. Is that where it shows up?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Okay.
so it's
So-
interesting. It's just
Could you scroll? could you
the
scroll
actual
the sheet?
warning.
Could you scroll the sheet so that everyone can see,
Yeah.
you know, what
25.
that looks like? Because those of us that have used this sheet understand it. But again, this is an explanation piece, like Doug was saying. You know, people need to be able to understand that this is a worksheet, you know, and basically an Excel spreadsheet. And when you manipulate portions of the cells, it does have that effect. So if you can just scroll and show the bottom half,
Yep.
you know, where the tax rate, you know, is situated, that would be helpful too as you
So
scroll.
in line 3, you're going to see the additional revenue applied. So
Right.
taking 19,703,874 down to
19,753,874.
It would go up.
Right.
Right, which is
Line
then
3
gonna
would then go
change
down.
line 28 to 7.5. So this is why it's so complicated for people to understand. It's
But I think the other piece, Tom, is when in the past, we've used an active sheet so that people could see it, you know, when we did the final, which is helpful when we're able to do that, because you can see it, you know. and
Yeah,
it
I think Jake can save it and see it tonight. Jake did the calculation on his computer. So,
Is there a login?
Well, see, the only thing I'm saying, Tom, is in the past, we do a shared screen.
Yeah.
And Jim, you know, or
He
Jake,
could.
you know, as we were moving through that process, you know, just did the shared screen so that, you know, not that we're questioning it, but, you know, a picture is worth 1,000 words, so to speak. You know, so if there's any way without a lot of, you know, extra headache, we
You
could
just
actually
say-
do that.
yeah, no, we can do that.
And I see it's going on as I'm speaking, so I already.
No, it's always best, and I used to have the live calculator
Yeah.
in the old days, but now that I have, you know, quite a staff, I do delegate some things to them.
While they're working on that, I want to say to the public that Russ is absolutely the person that needs to be presenting to the public. He puts it down into layman's terms that it's easy for them to understand. He did it one other year for us, and I think we had 2 questions out of the whole audience because it just broke it down so precisely and, like I said, in just some layman's terms, and they could understand what we were saying to them. So I think that he will do a very good job of doing that again.
Yeah, and I think different from previous years, one of the things we could do is we do have 2 meetings before we do the budget discussion candidates night. So maybe we just dedicate time at that first February meeting and the second one just to go over it, you know? So
Absolutely.
people know what you're doing.
Yeah, and we've already started working, and I've enlisted the help of Roy and Julie in doing this. So yes, very definitely, that was always my plan, is to do some type of presentation earlier the better, as Mr. Heavysides correctly points out. And the other part of the presentation is also provide information on the good things.
Mhm.
So people understand what their tax dollars are buying. And I noticed some skepticism already, but that's okay. But
There we go.
I just signed a check.
yeah, yeah, but I mean, because I mean, it's important to stress more is the numbers and the calculations are very important. There's going to be plenty of illustrative that, but there's also going to be information on what's happening. So it's not just the numbers.
I think they have the adjusted.
So here's the present sheet, 550,000 applied, gets us down to 7.5 on the property based, 0.4 on the income based.
Nice, thank you.
Good.
There it is.
And at least on the income base, it's basically the same as it was last year.
Mhm. Yeah,
2.4 last year, and it's 2.41. So
right.
for many of our taxpayers, they may not feel they'll feel an increase, but not as much as it was last year.
Exactly. And see that those are critical numbers, you know, and I know, you know, Tom said, you know, we've done different things, you know, in the past, but we've always had this active sheet at the meeting that we make this decision, because it's very clear what the effect is on decisions that we make that affect that rate. And then, you know, the last couple of presentations, like Nancy was saying, Russ did an incredible job and did a lot of research too in what goes into this, so that people understand as clearly as you can one of the most complex school tax systems in the country. And that's a fact. So kudos, Russ.
My understanding is that Tom has to have this to the town clerk tomorrow,
Yep.
which means that we need to sign something right away.
Yes.
Yep.
And I've got it prepared in your packet, and that is the right number. So if everybody's okay with the tax calculator, it'd be nice to, if you can display the most recent. Couple of changes in the warning that were just approved today. So I just wanted to go over those quick. And both of these warnings have been run by our attorney for school budget bond work, Elijah Emerson, who replaced John Paul Giuliani at Primer, Piper and Eggleston. And he's been terrific to work with. He reviewed them before the change in the language several times. There's been more changes than ever because of the pandemic, and that created some changes. And then this new language today that the governor did sign for the next 2 years that allows us to remove the wording from the warning about equalized pupil percentage increase from year to year, which is helpful because it was very, very misleading. Because it was not the total budget amount, it was the equalized pupil dollar amount. So let's see, Brian.
You want the warning up?
Yeah, there's several in there, so you're gonna put, actually in the.
Yeah, because
Google
there's two we
Docs.
have to approve tonight, right?
Yeah, there's two. One is for the March 4th meeting in the gym that we do to discuss your salaries and receive the reports of the board. And then that meeting is adjourned and we do the Australian ballot voting on Tuesday, the 7th. So there's two warnings, one for each of those meetings, because you're actually doing some voting at each. So really, the only change is if you see the two articles to elect the officers for the ensuing year. And then the voters of the district to approve the school board to expend $47,607,131 is one warning. And then on the second page is the February 27th candidates night budget discussion in the auditorium at 7 p.m. and the warning for the Saturday meeting, which is to elect the school officers for next school year and the budget. So I think I got both of those. Actually, the first one is to receive the reports and then the compensation for the school board members. And then the second one is for the officers, actually elect any officers that are up or running for office and the school budget. So they are in the right order. I thought I read them backwards, but I didn't. Questions or concerns or thoughts? Or, like I said, I've had both of them reviewed by the board's attorney. So if the members that are here tonight could sign.
Do we want to do a single sheet or do you want to?
It would be great on one sheet.
All right, so let me disassemble my packet.
Yeah, or I can disassemble mine.
I got it.
And each of the board members who's here can sign near their name on both sheets. And then tomorrow I will.
It is very small type.
Yes,
There's very
it
little
is.
Space, but we will get past that.
And then tomorrow I will
Write small.
docu-hub them to you, Coach.
Okay,
Hopefully you can get them signed in the morning because Lisa O'Neill wants them in her office as soon as possible so she can start posting them around town. And she has to post them in 11 places.
Boy, I don't think I've ever written that small and long.
I'm sorry. Did you find any
Just-
other material?
Share them on.
We're signing below.
Oh, thank you. I would have done that wrong.
The signature page is filed with the town clerk, so she needs to see all the signatures, but the one that goes in the town report is not the sign.
Say, I feel a little bit bad about making you sign this, Doug, since this is your first.
Yeah, what a meeting to
Baptism by
start,
fire.
huh?
Why not?
Yeah.
What a meeting to begin your tenure.
Really. All right, so to keep things
Thank
moving,
you so much.
board committee reports and updates. Do we have anything that our fellow members want to share? I think
The group meeting with the teachers to discuss the teachers' negotiation was able to reach a successful close to the negotiations, and both sides have committed to supporting that contract and with their respective So
Okay.
it was a very long and but cordial process. I think that we did a good job.
Okay. Nancy, anything?
I sent it out late this afternoon, sorry. For Hartford Community Coalition. One of the really great things is that at our last meeting, we added, we swore in 5 new board members. Yeah, all at one time. It was great. And our executive director is going crazy because she's got all these trainings that she's completed, both suicide prevention, drugs. She's working with the middle school SAP. Middle school has the SAP, right?
Yeah, both
And-
schools. do.
Okay, so she's been working with her, and we're really excited. Again, the picnic is June the 21st, will be the week after graduation. And we're continuing on and growing larger and doing more work. So I'm real excited about that part. The SBA is a long list again. So I'm not quite sure if the public is that interested in what's going on with it, but we've got a lot of work going on there too. And it's proving more and more interesting.
Okay. The support staff negotiations are making progress. However, we missed our last meeting because of a snow day.
Yeah.
So
Monday-
hopefully
Monday.
at our next board meeting, we'll have some more positive news to report. Building committee didn't meet, so I think that's all mine.
Yeah,
Coach?
We'll have to give Doug.
Just quickly, all of the signings, have been moving expeditiously. And as far as the DE&I work, that is moving along as well. And we're looking at what our next steps will be during the interim period of Maggie's replacement, as well as the long-term placement piece. It's almost like a teacher, well, she is a teacher. So, taking leave and then moving into from a long-term sub to a permanent position. So, those pieces are under discussion as we speak.
Okay. So next item which was added was a brief discussion on the calendar.
Yeah, I included the draft, really the first draft for the public in tonight's packet. And just wanted to let people see it, comment. The teachers union has commented on it. The principals or administration has commented on it for probably the past month. So, I think it's in good shape to bring to all of you and to the public for any comments. Depending on how negotiations settle, there will have to be a change to it. But other than that, I think it's pretty good to go. It's got to become a very complicated matter because I have to align it with, or I try to align it with all of the sending schools to the tech center and the collaborative programs.
And as
So
a
the kids
result-
don't suffer.
And as a result, we know that it will have been reviewed 15 times. You'll get at least 3 more things that need to be fixed.
Right. But it's been vetted all up and down, 91 and up 89 and, up 91. It's unbelievable.
And
Well,
just,
Tom, what's really handy too is the format that includes the staff and student days. That's helpful. As people look at that from the community and parents and the board.
Yeah, we've also included the last few years, which I realized didn't make it to this version, but the holidays.
Mhm.
Oh, there it is. It is on
Yep.
there. So
Yep.
just make it to my copy, but recognize holidays that people celebrate in our community so that
Mhm.
teachers and or staff are aware of why students might be out and whether it's excused or not. So that's something new. Those are colored in blue on the original version. It's quite a complex process. So I'm sort of proud of it. I know it seems like a small thing, but it's really a big task. And like I said, all of the 13 communities that we work with regularly have reviewed it and try to be as synchronized as possible. Some of the professional development days just aren't, but we've gotten a lot better.
Okay, so this will be brought back
Yeah.
for vote in a subsequent meeting. This is
Yeah.
just for review and.
And if
Okay.
it's final, we'll bring it in February. And if things aren't final by then, it'll have to be the second meeting in February.
Okay. So now we're at public comment.
Oh,
We recognize the distinguished gentleman.
Is this on? Joe Major, White River Junction. The first thing I wanted to do was commend the middle school administration for their restorative practices. I only wish that 48 years ago, Sister Mary Gallagher in Buffalo would have used that instead of the punitive part, which I am still scarred by. But actually, the real reason why I'm here is I wear several hats in the community. And one of the hats is member of the Hartford Committee on Racial Equity and Inclusion. And Coach stole my thunder. Maggie Ibrahim has been a tremendous part of what you have been doing. And in our last meeting, and the committee was a bit concerned about the gap of that work that she was doing in the time that she's going to take maternity leave and eventually move on to her next stop. But as you have time and time again shown, probably more than the town, because now I'm working with both of you, you have done and continue to do your due diligence. This is important work. I commend the school board, as well as Tom and his staff and administration for getting out in front of this. This is something that, and quite frankly, a town that is less than 5% of people of color, that you would say, why is it needed? And there are still some people who believe that it isn't needed, but Maggie has proven that it is needed, and her work has borne that out. And I want to congratulate her for her time here and what she has done. She has elevated the schools and done great work, and hopefully whomever takes over for her will be able to continue that work. So thank you, and thank you, Maggie.
Thank you, Joe. Any other comment?
Thanks, Joe.
Yeah, we just appreciate Joe serving on the committee. I mean, he does so much, and I know that's just another chunk of time you give up out of your life to help us, and we really appreciate it.
You're just gonna have to hire my divorce lawyer.
That's not in our budget.
there you go. I just have one thing that I would just like to add, because there's now some discussion going on amongst a couple of other groups. The there is an alliance now that has been put together by VSBA, VPA, VSA, VTNEA, and it's all been referred to by the V's. And the Supreme Court in June of last year set some new rules relating to taxpayer funding of exclusionary private schools. That affects all of our schools in the state of Vermont. It affects our budget. And these 5 different organizations, well, do I call them organizations? One of which I happen to be a member of. We're working very hard to, we're calling it the taxpayers at a crossroads. And we're working very hard to get the legislation to change some of the wording, especially in what's going on with it. It's we're spending a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of energy to get this done. And I think because we have to do what's right for each one of our own districts, and we still have to stay under the confines that the US Supreme Court has given to us now. So if you're starting to hear about something called the Education Equity Alliance, it's not a bad thing. And that's the only thing that we're working on. We're not trying to change anything else. We're not trying to bring anything else up. We're just trying to work on this so that it will come to a good ending for all of us. So I just wanted to bring that out there in case anyone else hears, because my phone is ringing off the hooks.
Okay, thank you, Nancy.
Thank you.
Any other public comment? Hearing none, we'll move on to the consent agenda. In your packet was the meeting minutes from January 11th. Any changes or concerns?
We do have one resignation, special ed teacher at White River School, Julian Menard, had to resign this week, so.
Okay,
With regret.
all right, so then,
I move that we approve the consent agenda with their thanks to our members of the committee.
okay,
Second.
okay, any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, I too. Opposed?
Aye.
So it carries unanimously. Okay. I think we've discussed several items that are going to be on our agenda for our next meeting, the budget. And I think, depending upon the chairs and the superintendents, we may talk a little bit about some of the revisions to the proposed ends policies in EL 10, the race and equity policy that I put forward.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. All
They
right.
are in the folder for tonight because I did receive them today, but they're really for the next meeting.
Yeah, I mean, that was on me. I didn't get them out till I remembered not to forget. All right. So now we're doing the meeting evaluation. At the end of the board meeting, each board member and the superintendent or appointed evaluator for the meeting completes this monitoring form. The responses are shared and a discussion is held on areas that need improvement. The chair collects the completed form to use in the board's monitoring reports. Board was prepared for the meeting, satisfactory. Board's time was spent on ends, not means, satisfactory. Each board member was given an opportunity to participate. I think so, yes, satisfactory. Board treated all persons with courtesy and fairness. Yeah, despite being Yankee fans. Board adhered to Robert's rules of order as appropriate and necessary, satisfactory. Board adhered to its adopted governance style. It emphasized outward vision. It encouraged diversity in viewpoints. It exercised strategic leadership, not administrative detail. It maintained distinction between board and staff roles. It used collective decision-making. It looked to the future. All satisfactory. And I'm going to start timing myself so I can get a record.
I would like to make a motion that we adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Thank you. Thank
That's
you very
it.
much. You did it. Good work.
Thank you,